2 trays of pepper seeds. Same seeds, same day, same warm spot on top of the refrigerator. The only difference was that one tray got a few minutes soaking in a weak solution of the cheapest thing in my whole garden shed. That tray came up in about half the time, and nearly every single seed sprouted. The other tray straggled in over 2 full weeks, and I lost close to a third of them to mold before they ever broke the surface. Same seeds, same effort, completely different result. But the thing that made the difference costs about $2 at any drugstore in America. It is the plain brown bottle of hydrogen peroxide, the same 3% kind you would dab on a scraped knee. Now, nobody's running a television commercial for a $2 brown bottle, so most folks never think to carry it out to the garden. I did, and I tested it every way I could think of in my own beds. Today, I am going to walk you through 12 real jobs it does out there, from waking up stubborn seeds to killing the little pests chewing on your roots. So stay with me all the way to the end, because there is one simple test that decides whether the bottle in your cabinet actually does any of this or does nothing at all. It all comes down to whether it fizzes, and the bottle that has been sitting under your sink for 2 years is very likely already dead. I am Steve Calloway. I've been growing food in the same backyard here in the Midwest for more than 20 years, and for most of those years I have kept side-by-side test beds and written down what actually happened, not what the label promised. My very first garden was a jungle of green leaves that gave me about a dozen tomatoes all summer, and fixing that failure taught me to trust the results in front of me over anything printed on a shelf. My wife Karen keeps the harvest log with me now, and these days our biggest problem is giving the food away fast enough. So why does something this cheap and this common get passed over? It comes down to money, plain and simple. A $2 bottle cannot pay for a fancy label or a good spot on the shelf at eye level, so the garden centers put their weight behind the expensive sprays and powders instead. This is not some secret being kept from you. Cheap things just do not get advertised, so most gardeners never think to carry them out to the beds. That is where my test beds come in. I do not teach anything I have not run side by side myself, one bed with it and one bed without, and Karen writing down the numbers. Hydrogen peroxide turned out to be one of those rare things that does several different jobs at once, and it does most of them for pennies. But before I get to the 12, remember what I said about the fizz. Hold on to that, because it is the whole reason every one of these works, and I promise it is not what most folks would guess. Number 1, and it is the one I opened the video with. Faster, stronger, germination. Before you plant, put your seeds in a small dish and cover them with a weak mix, about 1 part hydrogen peroxide to 4 parts water. That is 1 part peroxide and 4 parts water. Let them soak for just a few minutes, no more than 10. Then rinse them off and plant them the way you always would. 2 good things happen. The peroxide gently softens that hard seed coat so the little sprout can push through it faster, and it kills any mold or bacteria riding along on the outside of the seed. In my trays, the soaked seeds came up days ahead of the dry ones nearly every time. Go easy though. This is a short soak, a few minutes, not an overnight bath, or you can do more harm than good. Now, everything I'm showing you today is one piece of a much bigger system, and I wrote that whole system down day by day in a book called Steve's 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. It is the exact 30-day plan I follow in my own backyard to roughly double what every plant gives me, with no extra space and no expensive equipment. And it works the same in raised beds, in the ground, or in containers on a patio. Inside, I walk you through all 30 days, from getting your soil right to bringing in the harvest. I break down what I call the Big 7 yield killers, so you can find exactly what is holding your own garden back. And I show you how to feed a plant for fruit instead of just leaves, plus the pruning that feels wrong when you're doing it but ends up multiplying what you pick. It is 115 pages, and right now it is $17, marked down from $47. $17 against a garden that pays for itself all season long. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera, the same one you use to take pictures. Point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you're watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Take your time, there is no rush at all. I'll wait right here. All right, let's get back out to the garden because number 2 is the one that probably brought you here in the first place. Number 2 is the one you likely saw on your way in, the one that kills the little pests living in your soil, and it does it on contact. If you have ever watered a houseplant or a tray of seedlings and seen a little cloud of tiny black flies lift up off the dirt, those are fungus gnats. The flies themselves are just annoying. The real damage is happening down in the soil, where their larvae are chewing on your plant's tender young roots. Here is what I do about it. I mix up that same weak solution, about 1 part hydrogen peroxide to 4 parts water, and I water it right into the soil, the same as if I were watering the plant. That is 1 part peroxide to 4 parts water. The moment it reaches those larvae, it fizzes hard, and that fizzing is what tears them apart. Then within an hour or so, it breaks down into nothing but water and a little oxygen, so it is gone, and your plant is left sitting in clean, safe soil. I have cleared a badly infested tray of pepper seedlings in just 2 or 3 waterings doing exactly this. Now let me give you one honest word of caution. That same fizz kills the good little life in your soil too. So this is a spot treatment for a real problem, not something you pour on every week for the fun of it. And keep that fizz in mind because we are circling right back to it before we are done. Number 3, and this one honestly surprised me the first time I tried it, rescuing a plant that is drowning in wet soil. When the ground stays soggy, whether it is from a stretch of hard rain or just a heavy hand with the hose, the roots cannot get any air and they start to rot right there in the mud. Here is the tricky part. The plant wilts even though the soil is soaking wet, and that fools a lot of good gardeners because their first instinct is to grab the hose and water it more. That is the worst thing you can do to a drowning plant. Instead, water in that weak peroxide mix, 1 part peroxide to 4 parts water. As it breaks down, it releases oxygen right down at the root zone, which is the exact thing those suffocating roots are starving for. At the same time, it knocks back the rot that is already trying to set in. I have pulled wilting tomato plants back from the brink this way more than once and watched them perk up within a day or 2. It will not save a bed that drowns every single time it rains, so if a spot stays that wet, you have got a drainage problem to fix. But as an emergency, it buys the plant the air it needs to hang on. Number 4, stopping damping off before it takes the whole tray. If you start seeds indoors, you may have watched a healthy little seedling suddenly flop over one morning, pinched thin and shriveled right at the soil line. That is damping off. It is a fungus that lives in the soil, and it can wipe out a full tray of seedlings almost overnight. It broke my heart plenty of times in my early years before I got a handle on it. Now, at the very first sign of it, I missed the surface of the soil with a weak peroxide solution. And I let the trays dry out a bit between waterings because that fungus loves soggy, airless soil. The peroxide kills the fungus on the surface, and the extra oxygen helps the little stems firm up and stand strong. Better yet, prevention beats cure here, so I will often water a brand new tray with a very weak mix from the start, just as insurance. Keep it weak though. Seedlings are delicate, and too strong a mix will burn them off faster than any fungus ever could. Number 5, fighting off powdery mildew. This is that white, dusty coating that shows up on squash, cucumber, and zucchini leaves, usually in the heat of late summer, and left alone, it can shut a plant down weeks before it's time. For the leaves, I go a good deal weaker than the soil mix. I use just a tablespoon or 2 of hydrogen peroxide in a full quart of water in a spray bottle. That is a tablespoon or 2 per quart and no more. Then I spray it right onto the affected leaves, but only in the early morning or the evening, never in the strong midday sun, because peroxide and hot sun together will scorch the leaves. The oxygen it releases kills the mildew right on the surface where it sits. Now I will be straight with you the way I always try to be. This slows a case of mildew down and buys you a few good weeks, but it will not erase a bad outbreak that has already taken the whole plant. The real answer is catching it early and giving your plants enough room to breathe. Still, for $2, it is a fine thing to have on the shelf when you need it. Number 6 is the plain boring one that quietly saves you more heartache than any of the flashy ones. Cleaning your pots, your trays, and your tools between plantings. A whole lot of the disease you fight year after year is not blowing in on the wind at all. It is sitting right there in last season's dirty seed trays and flower pots, just waiting for spring. So before I reuse any of it, I knock off the old crusted soil and then I wipe it down or give it a soak in hydrogen peroxide, which kills the leftover fungus and bacteria that would otherwise get handed straight to your brand new seedlings. I do the very same thing with my pruners and my shears, especially right after I have been cutting on a plant that looked sick. So I'm not carrying that trouble from one plant over to the next. It takes about 5 minutes and it costs next to nothing. And speaking of nothing, we are getting close now to that fizz test I promised you at the start. Keep it in the back of your mind because once you have seen it, you will never again waste a single dollar on a dead bottle. Number 7, waking up old seeds you would otherwise throw away. We have all got that drawer somewhere with half-used seed packets from 3 or 4 springs back, and you never quite know whether they have still got any life left in them. Before you give up and toss them, give them the very same short soak. A few minutes in that week 1 to 4 mix, then a good rinse, then plant them like normal. The peroxide softens the aging seed coat and clears off the gunk that has built up on the outside over the years, and it can coax life out of seeds that would have just sat in the dirt and rotted. I have gotten tired old bean and pepper seeds to sprout this way when I had honestly written them off. It will not raise the truly dead ones. Nothing on earth will. But it will pull the borderline ones across the line far more often than not, and that alone can save you a trip to the store and a few dollars in fresh seed. Number 8, freshening up the water your plants actually drink. If you catch rainwater in a barrel out back, or you have got a watering can that sits full in the sun and starts growing green slime and smelling a little swampy, that is algae and bacteria taking hold in there. A small splash of hydrogen peroxide clears it right up. It kills the algae and the sour smell, and it puts a little extra oxygen into the water, which your plant's roots are actually happy to get. It is the same reason the folks who grow plants in water alone, with no soil at all, use peroxide to keep that water clean and their roots healthy and white. Just a splash will do it. You are not trying to make it strong, you're only keeping the water fresh. And cleaner water going in means fewer problems coming out of the garden. Number 9, knocking back the soft-bodied pests on your leaves. Aphids, those tiny green or black bugs that pile up on new growth and along the stems, can be sprayed with a weak peroxide mix, right about that same tablespoon or 2 per quart of water. It bothers their soft little bodies and it clears away the sticky residue they leave behind, which also helps stop the black mold that likes to grow on that stickiness. I will give it to you straight though. This one is weaker than the soil jobs. It works better as one part of a regular routine than as a single knockout punch, and just like the mildew spray, you keep it off the leaves in strong sun. For my money, the soil users are where peroxide really earns its keep. But on a mild outbreak, in a pinch, it will help you out. Number 10, getting air back down into tired, packed down soil. Over a long season, especially in beds that get stepped on or watered heavy day after day, the soil can pack in tight and go sour, and the roots simply cannot breathe in ground like that. A good watering with that weak 1 to 4 mix sends a burst of oxygen down into it and gives those roots some real relief. That is 1 part peroxide to 4 parts water once again. Now, I want to be honest, this is a short-term boost, not a replacement for good soil. The lasting fix is working in compost and keeping your feet off the bed so the ground stays loose. But when a plant looks stalled in heavy ground and you cannot quite figure out why, a little oxygen down at the roots is often the nudge that gets it moving again. Number 11, helping a transplant settle into its new home. When you move a young seedling out of its pot and into the garden, the roots get disturbed and the plant sulks for a few days, which we call transplant shock. When I water a new transplant in for the very first time, I will use a weak peroxide mix. The oxygen helps those roots recover and get back to work faster, and it cleans up any soil-borne trouble right there where the fresh roots are trying to spread out. It is a small thing, and I will not oversell it to you, but small things stack up across a whole garden. A plant that settles in a few days sooner is a plant that starts putting food on your table a few days sooner. And number 12, rooting new cuttings without watching them rot. If you like to grow new plants from cuttings, snipping a piece off and coaxing it to grow its own roots, the single biggest thing that goes wrong is the cut end rotting before it ever roots out. A drop or two of hydrogen peroxide in the glass of water you are rooting them in keeps that water clean and full of oxygen, so the cutting stays fresh long enough to do its job. Same idea if you start them in soil instead, where a very weak mix holds the rot off while the new roots form. It is the whole difference between a bright windowsill full of healthy little starts and a jar of slimy, mushy stems. And that brings me right up to the thing I have been promising you since the very first minute. So here it is, the one thing that decides whether any of this works at all. Why does hydrogen peroxide do so many different jobs? And how do you know if the bottle in your cabinet is even worth carrying outside? It all comes down to that fizz. Hydrogen peroxide is really just plain water with one extra atom of oxygen stuck onto it. And that extra atom is barely holding on. The moment it touches anything with life in it, a fungus gnat larva, a mold spore, a rotting root, a living seed, even the tiny critters in your soil, that spare oxygen rips loose all at once. That burst of oxygen is the fizzing you see and hear. And that burst is the whole show. It is what kills the soft-bodied pest. It is what knocks back the rot. It is what lifts air to a drowning root. And it is what wakes up a stubborn seed. Every single one of those 12 jobs is really just that one reaction, the oxygen coming off, doing the work. Now here is the part almost nobody thinks to check. That extra oxygen leaks out slowly all on its own, especially once the bottle has been opened and light gets at it. Give it a year or two sitting under the sink, and it has quietly turned back into plain water. It looks exactly the same. It smells the same. But it is flat, it is dead, and it will do absolutely nothing out in your garden. So here is the 3-second test, and I want you to do it before you trust any bottle. Pour a little onto some bare soil or onto a fresh cut slice of potato and watch it. If it foams and crackles and fizzes right up, it is alive and strong and ready to work. If it just sits there, flat and quiet, like plain tap water, throw it out and grab a fresh one, because a new bottle costs about $2 and a dead one costs you your whole result. Fresh fizzes and flat is worthless. That right there is the difference between the folks who swear by this stuff and the folks who tried it once and said it did nothing. And that, a $2 bottle, quietly doing the work of a whole shelf of expensive products, is exactly the kind of thing the entire system is built on. Cheap, tested in my own beds, and written out day by day so you can just follow along. That is Steve's 30-day maximum yield protocol. The whole 30-day plan to roughly double what your garden gives you for $17 instead of the $47 it started at. One good tomato season and it has already paid you back many times over. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera, the same one you use to take pictures. Point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you're watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Take your time. There is no rush at all. I'll wait right here. So there you have it. 12 real jobs for a $2 brown bottle and one simple fizz test to make sure yours still works. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments what you're growing this year and your best harvest number so far. I read every single one. And next time, I'm going to show you the 50-cent kitchen scrap I bury under my pepper plants the very day I set them in the ground. And the exact week in summer, it turns a stingy plant into one that will not stop setting fruit. Get out there and get your hands dirty, and I'll see you in the garden.